first time I saw him, I was lying flat on my back in the mud, staring up at the stormy Montana sky, unable to move my legs. The pain shooting through my lower back was nothing compared to the humiliation burning in my chest. 24 years old, a fourth-generation rancher, and I couldn't even get myself out of a ditch after a stupid fall from my horse. "Don't move," his voice cut through the rain before I saw his face. Deep, calm, commanding. Then he was there, kneeling beside me, his hands hovering over my body with a practiced hesitation that told me he knew exactly what he was doing. "Can you feel your legs?" "I can feel them," I managed through gritted teeth. "I just can't close them, can't move them together. Something's wrong with my back." His eyes met mine then, and the world seemed to narrow to just that moment. Dark brown eyes, almost black in the dim light, framed by a face that was all sharp angles and concern. Water dripped from the brim of his hat onto my chest. He was a stranger, but something about the way he looked at me made my breath catch in a way that had nothing to do with the pain. "I'm Lucas," he said, his hands finally making contact, one on my shoulder, steadying, the other reaching toward my lower back with careful precision. "I'm a paramedic. I was driving by when I saw your horse running loose. Stay still. I need to check your spine before we move you." That was how it started, with me vulnerable and broken in the mud, and him reaching down to save me. The hospital diagnosed it as severe muscle spasms and a pinched nerve, not a spinal injury, thank God. But the doctor's orders were clear: 6 weeks of limited mobility, physical therapy, and absolutely no ranch work. For someone who'd been working the family cattle ranch since I could walk, it felt like a death sentence. "My name is Carter Hayes. My family has owned Hayes Ranch for over 100 years, 1,500 acres of Montana grassland that my father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had poured their lives into. At 24, I was supposed to be taking over more responsibilities, proving I could handle the legacy. Instead, I was hobbling around the ranch house like an invalid, trying to hide how much each movement hurt. Lucas came by 3 days after the accident. I was on the front porch, frustrated and staring at the mountains, when his truck pulled up the long gravel drive. My heart did this strange flutter thing that I immediately tried to ignore. "Thought I'd check on you," he said, climbing out. He was taller than I remembered, maybe 6'2" to my 5'11", with broad shoulders that filled out his flannel shirt in a way that made me look away quickly. "How's the back?" "Better," I lied. "Thanks for stopping by. You didn't have to." "I know." He walked up the porch steps with an easy confidence, his boots heavy on the wood. "But I wanted to. Besides, I'm new to the area, just moved here 2 months ago for the paramedic position. Don't really know anyone yet." There was something vulnerable in that admission that made me soften. "Where'd you move from?" "Seattle." He leaned against the porch railing, and the afternoon sun caught in his dark hair, highlighting threads of auburn I hadn't noticed before. "Needed a change. Big city wasn't for me anymore." "And you chose Montana." I couldn't help the small smile. "That's a hell of a change." "That's the point." His lips curved into a grin that did something dangerous to my pulse. "Though I'll admit, I don't know much about ranch life, or small towns, or, well, anything out here, really." We talked for an hour, then 2. By the time the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I'd learned that Lucas was 26, had been a paramedic for 5 years, loved hiking and photography, and had a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard and made me laugh harder than I had in months. And somewhere in that conversation, something shifted in my chest, something I'd spent years pushing down and refusing to acknowledge. I didn't want him to leave. That was the thought that scared me most. Lucas started coming by regularly after that. At first, he'd say it was to check on my recovery, his medical training making him the perfect excuse. But soon, the pretense dropped away, and he'd just show up with coffee or lunch, and we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. "You know, for someone who's supposed to be resting, you're terrible at following doctor's orders," he said one afternoon, finding me trying to fix a section of fence near the barn. The pain in my back had dulled to a manageable ache, and I was going stir-crazy inside. "I'm not doing heavy lifting," I protested, though I immediately set down the post driver when I saw the look on his face. Carter, he said my name like a reprimand and a caress at the same time, and I felt it in my stomach. Come on, let me help at least. That's how Lucas started working on the ranch. He'd show up in the mornings before his shifts, helping with the lighter tasks I couldn't manage alone. He was a quick learner, asking questions about everything from cattle care to equipment maintenance. My father, who ran the ranch with my two older brothers, was skeptical at first, but even he warmed up to Lucas's easy manner and genuine interest. That friend of yours is good people, Dad said one evening at dinner. Strong worker, respectful, rare to find these days. Friend, the word sat heavy in my chest, because that's what Lucas was becoming, more than just the stranger who'd helped me. He was becoming someone I looked forward to seeing every day, someone whose laugh I'd started to memorize, someone whose presence made the ranch feel less like an obligation and more like home. But there was something else, too. Something in the way his hand would linger on my shoulder when he helped me up, the way his eyes would find mine across the barn and hold just a moment too long, the way we'd both go quiet sometimes when we stood too close, the air between us charged with something neither of us acknowledged. I told myself I was imagining it. I had to be. 6 weeks turned into 2 months, and Lucas was still around. My back had healed, the physical therapy sessions had ended, and I was back to full ranch duties. But Lucas kept coming by, kept helping out, kept finding reasons to be there. And I kept letting him, kept looking for him first thing every morning, kept feeling this pull toward him that was getting harder to ignore. Why do you keep coming here? I asked him one evening. We were sitting on hay bales in the barn, watching the sunset through the open doors. The question had been building in me for weeks. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his profile silhouetted against the golden light. Honestly, because this place feels right, you feel. He stopped, cleared his throat. Being here feels right. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Lucas. I know, he said quickly, not looking at me. I know what you're going to say, that I should probably find something else to do with my free time, that I can't keep showing up here like some stray you took in. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. You're right, I just. That's not what I was going to say. The words came out rough, barely above a whisper. I was going to ask why you never mention anyone, a girlfriend back in Seattle, someone waiting for you. You talk about everything else, but never that. Now he did look at me, and the intensity in his eyes made my breath stop. There's no one, there hasn't been anyone in a long time, and the reason I don't talk about it is, he exhaled slowly, it's complicated. Complicated how? Complicated like I moved to Montana to get away from a life that didn't fit anymore. Complicated like I'm still figuring out who I am without all the noise of the city and the expectations and the... He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Complicated like I didn't expect to find someone here who makes me want to figure it all out even faster. The barn felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. We were sitting maybe 2 feet apart, but it felt like inches. Someone, I managed. Carter, he said my name like a confession. Don't make me spell it out. I should have pulled back, should have made a joke, changed the subject, done anything to break the tension that was wrapping around us like a rope pulling tight. Instead, I leaned closer, just slightly, testing. What if I need you to spell it out? His eyes dropped to my mouth, then back up. I think you know. Lucas, I didn't know what I was trying to say. Every instinct I'd been taught, every expectation that came with the Hayes name and this ranch and this life was screaming at me to stop. But there was something louder underneath it all, something that had been building since that first day in the mud when he'd looked at me like I was worth saving. We should go inside, Lucas said abruptly, standing up. It's getting late, I should head home. Just like that, the moment shattered. He was walking away, and I was letting him, and we both knew something had changed that we couldn't take back. Things got awkward after that night. Lucas still came by, but less often, and when he did, there was a careful distance between us that hadn't been there before. We didn't sit close anymore. We didn't let conversations drift into personal territory. It was like we were both trying to pretend that moment in the barn had never happened, but the absence of it made everything worse. I threw myself into ranch work, taking on more hours, pushing myself harder than I had before the injury. My brothers noticed, making comments about me trying to prove something, but I ignored them. I needed the distraction. I needed to stop thinking about dark eyes and the way someone's name could sound like a prayer and a question at the same time. 3 weeks of this careful distance passed before everything fell apart. It was a Saturday night, and the town's only bar was hosting their monthly music night. I rarely went, small town bars weren't really my scene, and avoiding questions about why I was always alone got exhausting. But my brother Mason was playing guitar with his band, and he'd guilted me into showing up. That's where I saw Lucas. He was at a table in the corner with a group from the fire station, laughing at something someone had said, a beer in his hand. And next to him, sitting too close, touching his arm when she laughed, was Sarah Mitchell, the elementary school teacher, sweet and pretty, and exactly the kind of woman everyone in town would expect Lucas to be with. The jealousy that ripped through me was physical, painful, undeniable. I'd never felt anything like it. I stood frozen by the door, watching them, watching the way she looked at him, the way he smiled back, polite but not pulling away. And something in me just broke. I left before anyone could see me, drove back to the ranch with my hands shaking on the wheel, my vision blurred with something I refused to acknowledge as tears. I was angry at Lucas, at myself, at this whole situation that I'd let develop into something impossible. I was in love with him. The realization hit me as I pulled up to the dark ranch house, and it felt like falling all over again, like lying in that mud, unable to move. I was in love with Lucas, and he was at a bar with a woman who could give him a normal life, and I was a rancher in Montana who'd spent his whole life pretending to be something he wasn't. I didn't go inside the house. Instead, I walked to the barn, to the same hay bales where we'd almost said too much 3 weeks ago. And I sat there in the dark, trying to figure out how I'd gotten here and how I was supposed to move forward. Carter! I jerked my head up. Lucas was standing in the barn doorway, backlit by moonlight, still wearing the same clothes from the bar. What are you doing here? My voice came out harsher than I intended. I saw you at the bar, saw you leave. He walked closer, his footsteps careful. I followed you. Are you okay? I'm fine. You should go back to your date. My date? He sounded genuinely confused. Sarah, that's not, Carter, that's not what that was. She's just a friend from work who wouldn't leave me alone until I agreed to come out. I was miserable the whole time. You looked happy. I was pretending. He sat down on the hay bale next to me, closer than he'd been in weeks. The way I've been pretending for the last 3 weeks, that I don't think about you constantly, that I don't lie awake at night replaying every conversation we've had, that I didn't move to Montana trying to escape feelings I couldn't handle, only to find something so much more complicated and real. I couldn't breathe, Lucas. No, let me finish. His voice was shaking now. I'm terrified, Carter. I'm terrified of what I feel for you, of what it means, of what happens if I'm wrong about what I think I see in the way you look at me. But I'm more terrified of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. The moonlight caught the planes of his face, and he looked vulnerable and brave and beautiful, and I couldn't hold back anymore. You're not wrong, I whispered. You're not wrong about any of it. His breath hitched. Carter. I saw you with her tonight, and I wanted to leave town, wanted to run somewhere I wouldn't have to see you with someone else. And I realized I had to force the words out, years of denial fighting against this moment of truth. I realized I'm in love with you. I think I've been in love with you since that first day when you reached down and told me not to move. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then Lucas's hand came up, cupping my face with a gentleness that made my eyes sting. I'm in love with you too, he breathed. God, Carter, I'm so in love with you I can barely think straight. We were inches apart now, our foreheads almost touching, breathing the same air. Every nerve in my body was alive, every moment of the past months leading to this. What do we do? I asked. This, he whispered, and closed the distance between us. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like we were both still half afraid this wasn't real. His lips were warm against mine, tasting like beer and something sweeter, and when I leaned in closer, his hands slid into my hair, holding me there like he was afraid I'd disappear. I'd never kissed anyone like this, never felt anything like the way my entire body seemed to light up at his touch. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, our hands still tangled in each other's shirts. Lucas pressed his forehead against mine, his eyes closed, a smile playing at his lips. We probably should have done that weeks ago. Probably, I agreed, and pulled him back for another kiss. We stayed in that barn until the early hours of the morning, talking and kissing and planning a future that suddenly seemed possible. Lucas told me about growing up in Seattle, about knowing he was different from a young age, but not having the words or the courage to face it until his mid-20s. About the relationships that hadn't worked because he'd been trying to be someone he wasn't. About moving to Montana as a fresh start, never expecting to find someone who'd make him want to stop running. I told him about the ranch, about the weight of legacy and expectations, about the fear of disappointing my family and losing everything I'd built my identity around. About the years of pushing down feelings I couldn't name, of telling myself I just hadn't met the right woman yet, of the loneliness that came with living a half-truth. "What happens now?" I asked as the sky started to lighten toward dawn. We were lying back on the hay, his arm around my shoulders, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Now we figure it out together," he said simply. "We take it slow. We are careful because I know this is complicated for you with your family and the ranch. But Carter," he tilted my face up to look at him, "I'm not going anywhere, not unless you tell me to." "Don't go anywhere," I whispered. "Please." He kissed my forehead, soft and sweet. "Never." The next few weeks were the happiest and most terrifying of my life. Lucas and I were together, really together, but we were careful about it. In town, we were just friends, the rancher and the paramedic who'd bonded over an accident. At the ranch, when we were alone, we were more. Stolen kisses in the barn, hands held in the truck on long drives to check on cattle, quiet evenings on the porch, where we could just be ourselves without worrying who might see. It was enough. Most days, it was enough. But there were moments when the hiding felt like acid in my throat. When we'd be at the hardware store and Lucas would make me laugh, and I'd have to stop myself from touching him the way I wanted to. When someone would ask Lucas if he was seeing anyone, and he'd say no with an easy smile, and I'd feel the lie like a physical weight. When my father would make casual comments about grandkids and carrying on the Hayes name, and I'd have to nod along while my heart was breaking. "This can't be forever," Lucas said one night. We were in his apartment, a small place above the old pharmacy in town, lying tangled together on his couch after dinner. "The hiding, I know you need time and I respect that, but Carter, I can't be a secret forever." "I know," I pressed my face into his neck, breathing him in. I'm scared of what changes when people know, of losing my family's respect, of the ranch, the legacy, all of it." "You won't lose it," he said gently, running his fingers through my hair. "And if you do, then maybe it wasn't yours to begin with. Not really." His words stayed with me, nagging at the edges of my consciousness like a splinter I couldn't quite remove. Because he was right. I knew he was right. But knowing it and being brave enough to act on it were two different things entirely. The decision was made for me 3 months after Lucas and I got together. It was a Sunday afternoon, and we'd been working on the far pasture, checking fence lines. My brother Jackson and his wife Emma had driven out to help, making it a family day like we used to do growing up. Lucas had come along, fitting into the work with the easy competence he'd developed over months of helping out. To anyone watching, we were just friends, co-workers, nothing more. But I got careless. We all did sometimes, when happiness made you forget to be careful. Lucas and I were walking back to the trucks, maybe 20 feet ahead of Jackson and Emma. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and Lucas was telling me some ridiculous story about a call he'd responded to last week, and I was laughing, really laughing, and without thinking, I reached out and squeezed his hand. Just for a second. A brief touch of reassurance and affection that felt as natural as breathing. I didn't see Jackson stop walking behind us. Didn't see the way his expression shifted from confusion to understanding. Didn't realize we'd been caught until we got back to the trucks and Jackson pulled me aside, his voice low and serious. "Carter, need to talk to you, alone." My stomach dropped. Lucas met my eyes, and I saw my own fear reflected there. It's okay, I told him quietly. I'll catch up with you. When Lucas and Emma had driven off toward the main house, Jackson crossed his arms and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. How long? He asked. I could have played dumb, could have asked what he meant, bought myself a few more minutes of denial, but I was tired. So tired of hiding, of lying, of being afraid. 3 months officially, but longer than that, really. Jackson was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he wasn't sure how to say. He was 2 years older than me, had always been the responsible one, the one who did everything right. Does Dad know? No, you're the first. Jesus, Carter, he rubbed a hand over his face. This is big, you know that, right? This changes everything. I know, my voice cracked slightly. Are you going to tell him? That's not my place. Jackson looked at me then, really looked at me, and I braced myself for disappointment or anger or disgust. Instead, I saw something that looked almost like sadness. But Carter, you can't keep this hidden forever. It's not fair to you or to Lucas. What do you think he'll say? The question came out small, younger than my 24 years. Jackson sighed. I don't know, Dad's traditional, set in his ways. This is going to shake him. He paused, then added more softly, but he loves you, that has to count for something. We stood there in the fading light, the Montana wind picking up around us, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing I was about to jump, but not knowing if there was water below or rocks. Does it change things, I asked, between us? Jackson looked at me for a long moment, and I saw him struggling with something. Finally, he stepped forward and pulled me into a brief, rough hug. You're my brother, he said gruffly. That doesn't change, but Carter, you need to tell him soon, before someone else does, before this blows up in a way you can't control. I told Lucas that night what had happened. We were back at his apartment, and I watched his face carefully as I explained Jackson's reaction, his advice, the deadline that was now looming over us like a storm cloud. He's right, Lucas said immediately. Carter, we can't wait anymore. You have to tell your family. I know, I was packing his small living room, too anxious to sit still. What if this destroys everything? What if Dad kicks me off the ranch? What if my family can't accept it? Lucas stood up, catching my hand and pulling me to a stop. Then we'll deal with it, together. But Carter, living like this, hiding who you are, it's killing you. I can see it every day, the toll it takes. And I love you too much to watch you disappear into someone else's expectations of who you should be. I love you too, I whispered, the words still new enough to make my heart race. I'm just scared. I know, he pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me. But you're the bravest person I know, you just don't see it yet. We made a plan that night. I would tell my father the next evening, after dinner, when it was just the two of us. Lucas offered to come with me, to stand beside me when I did it, but I knew this was something I had to do alone. My family, my truth to tell. I barely slept that night, running through 100 different versions of how the conversation might go, each one ending worse than the last. The day passed in a blur of nervous energy. I went through the motions of ranch work, but my mind was elsewhere, rehearsing words that never felt right. Jackson caught my eye a few times during the day, giving me small nods of encouragement that helped more than I expected. Dinner that evening was a normal family affair. Mom's pot roast, my brothers talking about fence repairs and cattle prices, Dad holding court at the head of the table the way he always did. I could barely eat, my stomach twisted in knots, but I forced myself to act normal, to laugh at the right moments, to contribute to the conversation when expected. After dinner, Mason and Jackson headed home to their own families. Mom went to the living room with her book, and Dad settled into his usual spot on the back porch with his evening coffee, looking out over the land that 4 generations of Hayes men had worked. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and needing in equal measure. I poured myself a cup of coffee I didn't want, then walked out onto the porch. Dad glanced over at me, smiled. Beautiful evening, he said. Think we might get rain tomorrow, though. skies looking heavy to the west. Dad, my voice came out rougher than I intended. I need to talk to you about something important. His expression shifted immediately, the easy smile fading into something more guarded. He was a smart man, my father. He'd probably seen this coming from a mile away. All right, he said slowly, setting down his coffee cup. What's on your mind, son? I sat down in the chair next to him, my hands wrapped around the hot cup for something to hold on to. It's about Lucas, about why he's been spending so much time here, why he's important to me. Dad was very still. Go on. He's not just a friend, Dad. We're together. Lucas and we've been together for 3 months now, and I had to force the next words out, my throat tight. I'm in love with him, and I know that's not what you expected, not what you wanted for me, but it's the truth. It's who I am. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an eternity. Dad stared out at the mountains, his jaw working, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. How long have you known? That I'm gay, always, I think. But I've been pushing it down, pretending, trying to be what I thought I should be, what you needed me to be. What I needed, he turned to look at me then, and I saw pain in his eyes that cut deeper than anger would have. Carter, all I've ever needed is for you to be happy, to be yourself. But the ranch, the legacy, is just land and cattle, he interrupted. It's important, yes, but it's not worth your happiness. It's not worth you living a lie. He was quiet for a moment, then added more softly, I knew, maybe not the specifics, but I knew something was going on with you and Lucas. The way you two looked at each other. A father notices these things. My heart was pounding, and you're okay with it. Dad exhaled slowly, and I could see him struggling with something. I'd be lying if I said this doesn't challenge some things I always believed. The way I was raised, the expectations of this life. But Carter, you're my son, you're my youngest boy, and I watched you grow up into a good man. A man I'm proud of. That doesn't change just because you love someone I didn't expect you to. Relief crashed over me so hard I felt dizzy with it. Dad, I'm going to need time, he continued, holding up a hand, to adjust, to understand, and I can't promise I'll always say the right thing or handle this perfectly. But you're my son and I love you. That's not conditional. It never has been. I couldn't stop the tears then, couldn't hold back the emotion that had been building for months. My father stood up and pulled me into a hug, the kind of fierce embrace he hadn't given me since I was a kid. I love you, Carter, he said roughly, and if Lucas makes you happy, if he's good to you, then I'll figure out how to be okay with it. We'll all figure it out together. Telling the rest of the family was easier after that. My mother cried, but they were good tears, tears of relief that I wasn't carrying this alone anymore. Mason was supportive in his gruff way, making jokes to cut the tension, but letting me know he had my back. Even the extended family, when word gradually got around, was more accepting than I'd feared. There were difficult conversations, some relatives who struggled with it more than others, but the core of my family stood firm. The town was harder. Small communities have long memories and strong opinions, and not everyone was thrilled about the rancher's son being with another man. We got stares at the grocery store, whispered comments at church, a few people who'd been friendly suddenly finding reasons to cross the street when they saw us coming. But we also found unexpected allies. The owner of the feed store, a grizzled old cowboy named Walt, made a point of treating us exactly the same as always, even calling out someone who made a rude comment in his presence. Sarah Mitchell, the teacher from the bar that night, became one of Lucas's closest friends, fiercely defensive of our relationship. And slowly, gradually, the town adjusted. We became just Carter and Lucas, the rancher and the paramedic, partners in work and in life. Lucas moved into the ranch house 6 months after I came out to my family. We converted one of the guest bedrooms into his space, though most nights we slept in mine, tangled together under quilts my grandmother had made decades ago. He learned the ranch inside and out, becoming as integral to its operation as any Hayes had ever been. And I learned to be myself, fully and completely, without fear or shame. The ranch thrived under our combined efforts. Lucas brought new ideas, a fresh perspective that pushed us to try sustainable grazing practices and diversify our income streams. Within a year, Hayes Ranch was more profitable than it had been in a generation, and my father started introducing Lucas as his son-in-law long before we made anything official. 2 years after that day in the mud, when Lucas first reached down to help me, we stood in the same spot, now marked with wildflowers we'd planted together. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and our families and friends were gathered around us in a semicircle. Lucas was wearing a dark suit that made his eyes look even deeper, and when he smiled at me, it was with the same intensity I remembered from that very first day. We'd written our own vows, and when it was my turn to speak, I took his hands in mine and tried to find words for everything he'd become to me. I was lying in the mud, unable to move, thinking my life was over, I said. But you reached down and told me I was going to be okay. You've been telling me that ever since, in 100 different ways. You saved me that day, Lucas, not just from the injury, but from a life half-lived. You taught me that being brave enough to be myself was worth more than any legacy or expectation. You showed me what love really means. Lucas's eyes were bright with tears. You gave me a home, he said when it was his turn, a place to belong, a family to love, a life worth living. I came to Montana running from who I was, and you helped me figure out who I could be. Every day with you is a gift, Carter. Every moment is home. When we kissed, sealed together in promises and love, the crowd erupted in cheers. My father was wiping his eyes openly, my mother was sobbing happily into a tissue, and my brothers were whistling and hooting like we'd just won a rodeo event. And Lucas and I stood there, holding each other, surrounded by the land and the life we'd built together, and I thought about that moment 2 years ago when I'd been broken in the mud and a stranger had reached down to save me. I'd had no idea then that he'd be saving me for the rest of my life. Life wasn't perfect after that. We still faced challenges, difficult clients who didn't want to work with a gay rancher, family members who struggled more than others to accept our relationship, moments when the weight of judgment felt too heavy to carry. But we faced them together, and that made all the difference. Lucas built a photography business on the side, capturing the Montana landscape he'd fallen in love with, and his work started getting recognition in galleries across the state. I continued to build Hayes Ranch into something my great-grandfather would have been proud of, but with a modern sensibility that made room for change and growth. We talked about adoption someday, about raising kids on this land the way generations of Hayes children had been raised, teaching them to be strong and kind and true to themselves. On quiet evenings, we'd sit on that same porch where I'd first confessed my fears to my father, Lucas's hand in mine, watching the sun set over the mountains. And I'd think about the title of my own story, I Can't Close My Legs, Why Did This Rancher Reach Down, and How Did a Stranger Change His Life Forever? The answer was simple and complicated all at once. Lucas reached down because he was a good man who helped people, and he changed my life because he saw me, really saw me, when I couldn't even see myself. He gave me the courage to be honest, to be vulnerable, to be loved exactly as I was. The physical injury healed in weeks, but the emotional wounds, the years of hiding and shame and fear, those took longer. And Lucas was patient through all of it, holding my hand through every difficult conversation, every moment of doubt, every step forward into the life we were building together. 2 years after our wedding, we were hosting a big family barbecue at the ranch. The yard was full of people, both our families, friends from town, even some of the ranch hands and their families. Lucas was manning the grill, laughing at something my brother Jackson was saying, completely at ease in his role as part of the Hayes clan. I watched him from across the yard, and my father came to stand beside me, following my gaze. "You did good, son," he said quietly, "real good." "I got lucky," I replied. "No," Dad shook his head, his eyes still on Lucas. "Lucky is finding a $20 bill in your jacket pocket. What you two have, that's not luck. That's courage. That's choosing love even when it's hard. That's being brave enough to be yourself." He turned to look at me then, and I saw pride in his weathered face. "Your great-grandfather built this ranch with his bare hands. Your grandfather kept it going through droughts and depressions. Your mother and I raised 3 boys here and tried to teach them to be good men. But you, Carter, you're making this place into something more, something better. a place where people can be themselves, love who they love, build the lives they want to build. He clapped me on the shoulder, then walked off to help with the food, leaving me standing there with tears in my eyes and a heart so full it felt like it might burst. Lucas caught my eye from across the yard and smiled, that same smile that had been saving me over and over again for the past 4 years. And I smiled back, grateful beyond words for the day I fell off my horse, for the stranger who'd stopped to help, for the courage to reach back when he reached down. Because love, I'd learned, wasn't just about the big dramatic moments, the confessions and the fears overcome. It was about the small things too, the morning coffee made just right, the hand held during a thunderstorm, the quiet evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over land that had been in my family for generations and would, God willing, be in our family for generations more. It was about building a life together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage at a time. And as I walked across the yard to join my husband at the grill, surrounded by family and friends who'd learned to love us as we were, I knew that this right here, was everything I'd ever needed. Everything I'd been too scared to reach for until someone showed me it was possible. Lucas had reached down into the mud and pulled me up, but in doing so, he'd lifted us both into a life more beautiful than either of us could have imagined. That evening, after everyone had gone home and we'd cleaned up the remains of the party, Lucas and I took a walk out to the far pasture, the same one where Jackson had first caught us holding hands. The stars were out in full force, the way they only are in Montana, away from city lights and noise. "Do you ever regret it?" Lucas asked, his arm around my waist as we walked, coming out, dealing with all the judgment and difficulty. I stopped walking and turned to face him, taking both his hands in mine. "Never," I said firmly, "not for a single second, because look what I would have missed." I gestured around us, at the land, the sky, the life we'd built. I would have missed this, missed you, missed us, missed becoming the person I was always supposed to be. Lucas pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "I love you, Carter Hayes." "I love you too, Lucas Hayes." The name still gave me a thrill, even after 2 years of marriage. "Thank you for reaching down, for saving me." "You saved yourself," he murmured against my hair. I just held out my hand. "Then thank you for holding out your hand, for not giving up, even when I was too scared to grab on." We stood there under the stars, holding each other, two men who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the courage to be honest. And I thought about all the young people out there, in small towns and big cities, on ranches and in apartments, who were where I'd been 4 years ago, scared and hiding and convinced they'd have to choose between who they were and the life they wanted. I hoped they'd find their Lucas, someone who'd reach down when they were broken, who'd see them when they couldn't see themselves, who'd stand beside them when the world pushed back. But more than that, I hoped they'd find the courage to reach back, to grab on, to let themselves be saved and to save themselves in the process. Because that's what this story was really about, not just about the stranger who changed my life, but about the choice I made to let him, the choice to be brave, the choice to live truthfully even when it cost me something, the choice to believe that love, real, honest, true love, was worth fighting for. The ranch stretched out around us, generations of history and hope and hard work, and we were part of that now, Lucas and I, writing our own chapter in the Hayes legacy, a chapter about courage and love and becoming who you're meant to be. I couldn't close my legs that day in the mud, broken and scared and calling for help, but what I found when someone reached down to save me was so much more than rescue. I found love, I found home, I found myself. And that, I've learned, is the greatest gift anyone can receive. The end. Speech balloon, did this story touch your heart? If Carter and Lucas's journey moved you, if you felt the tension, the fear, the hope, and the love, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional story like this one. Like this video, if you believe everyone deserves to love who they love and be exactly who they are. Thought balloon comment below. What was your favorite moment in Carter and Lucas's story? Have you ever had to find the courage to be your authentic self? Share your thoughts. I read every single comment. And here's the question everyone's asking. Should I tell you what happened next? What about Carter and Lucas's journey towards starting a family? The challenges they faced, the joy they found, the legacy they built together. Drop a yes in the comments if you want part 2. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for supporting love in all its forms. You're not just an audience, you're a community that believes in authenticity, courage, and the power of love. See you in the next story, Blue Heart.